And we're back. Hopefully, everybody can see this live video. The last one that I started with our amazing guest, Dr. Elizabeth Delery, who I'm going to bring on again here really quick, kind of got weird. So, anyone out there who knows how to do live videos, I'm using the OBS thing. Anyway, throw that away. So, we're going to go back to that original question of what the hell is COVID-19? We're hearing all about it. I think it just got promoted, or I don't know the right words for this, to a pandemic or an epidemic, which is super scary. I have a lot of questions, and luckily, I get to talk to some amazing experts. That's the idea with Ask Me, I'm a Scientist, where we talk to experts about whatever is in the news right now, and you get a chance to ask them questions. So, with that, let's bring on Dr. Elizabeth Delery. I keep calling you doctor because that is so exciting to me. PhD, you are a postdoctoral fellow at LSU Health Sciences Center. And yeah, you're a virologist, immunologist. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I got my PhD in biomedical sciences from Tulane, and I had a concentration in microbiology and immunology, but I worked with in a primate model, so SIV or simian immunodeficiency virus, and I studied how it subverts the immune system and also how the checks and balances of the immune system affected whether it spread and things like that.
Great.
So that part of virology.
Okay, so that feels like a lot of different stuff. I have a bachelor's in microbiology. I took some immunology. I took some virology. But there's a lot of really complex things going on there. It sounds like you have a pretty diverse background with that, and talking about these different related viruses. Are all viruses the same? And I'm hearing a lot about how it's basically like a souped up flu. What's going on? Like, what are the differences?
So there are tons of different viruses out there, and I don't think people realize that there are families, whole separate groups of families of viruses, and influenza is entirely separate from the coronaviruses, which in themselves are their own family. And there are a couple different strains inside of that family too. And unlike the flu, I mean, they're both upper respiratory. They both cause coughs, shortness of breath, fever, things like that. But they're both very separate entities, in that they have different mechanisms of how they infect you, things like that.
Right.
So they're both pretty cool.
That's so interesting. I don't know. I think viruses are the coolest thing ever. Yeah,
Oh,
but
me too. Me too. The moment this came out back in since January 1st, I've just been on this, just
same.
obsessively on
All over
this.
things all the time. Um,
So
yeah.
fascinated.
So I guess my next question is basically like, what am I supposed to call this? So is it COVID-19? Is it coronavirus? I saw something about SARS. What's happening?
And that's an excellent question. And I'd say a lot of the confusion comes from the WHO and the governing bodies of science taking so long to actually name the virus. If you guys remember back in January, they were calling it nCoV-19 for novel coronavirus 19 because it was a new coronavirus that they discovered in 2019. But once the governing bodies came in and named it, because it's similar enough in family and genetic structure to what I'm calling the OG SARS back from 2002 to 2004, they've renamed it SARS-CoV-2 since it's the second. And SARS being severe acute respiratory syndrome, CoV being coronavirus 2. And then the disease that it presents and creates is the COVID-19 for coronavirus disease 19. So that's kind of where the confusion comes
Okay.
from.
Okay. So, and I saw something else. ARDS. ARDS.
That one I haven't
Okay.
seen. Do you know what
I
it
think it
stood
was
for? Oh, acute respiratory
yes,
disease
that
syndrome.
one. That one. So it's
Yeah,
and
yeah. And that's a wide variety of respiratory
okay.
diseases.
Okay. So this makes sense. Um. All right. So it's got all these names, but what does it do? And specifically with your background in immunology, your background in how the body fights off diseases, uh, how does this even make us sick?
And that's an excellent question. So, what happens with the virus? They're saying it spreads in respiratory droplets. So, you inhale it, the virus gets down into your lungs. Now, you have lung epithelial cells which line your airways, and they have something known as the ACE2 receptor on these cells. It stands for the angiotensin receptor, angiotensin converting enzyme 2. Um, don't worry, once you get into science, you don't actually have to know like all of these complicated terms all the time. You end up learning this like niche of terms that you go into. And anyway, much like a lock and key, a virus can't get into a cell unless it has like the right key to open the door to get into that cell. And ACE2 is how coronaviruses get into, or the SARS coronaviruses get into your cells. And once they get inside, they start replicating and releasing more virions. And the problem with this, that they're assuming is why it's so severe, is because it replicates really quickly. And that can override your immune system as your immune system tries to ramp up to fight off all of this replication. And that can cause some problems when the immune system kind of falls out of balance.
So, in terms of falling out of balance, I kind of want to go back to that because I think my biggest fear, at least, is okay, falling out of balance. I'm somewhere between. Okay, this. I just listened to this audiobook about Ebola, so I think I really messed up with that choice. Um, yeah,
You'll
yeah,
panic.
exactly. I think there's a lot of feelings of panic, and I guess this kind of goes back to one of the biggest scary things about Ebola is that there's no vaccine, and that's true with this as well. Why don't we have a vaccine for this yet? I mean, it seems, that you said that there's CoV-2, there's other coronaviruses. Why don't we just have a vaccine that covers every coronavirus?
Yeah, no worries. And that's a great question because literally right before we started this, one of my friends sent me a meme that's circulating on Facebook of a little vaccine vial for bovine coronavirus vaccine for a coronavirus that's found in cattle. And she's like, well, we've got this. Why can't we use this for all of the coronaviruses? And it's because they all differ just a little bit in their genetic makeup and how you're supposed to target and attack them. And there's a lot of research that goes into vaccines. They go from everywhere from the preclinical, where they're looking at like cell culture and animal models to see what if they get a model of the infection or the virus, and then if their drug actually works on whether it's like maybe blocking the ACE2 receptors so that the coronavirus can't bind and get in, or maybe it's something else where it prevents the virus from like being exocytosed from the cell or like being kicked out of the cell so the infection can spread. So it's like once it infects the cell, it can't really
Mm-hmm.
go anywhere, which would limit infection. So it's like right now they're doing a lot of research to figure out what the best mechanisms are for controlling this one, because it still differs from the OG SARS that I'm calling it. I think
The
it said that the
OG
spike
SARS.
protein, which is not, I'm calling it OG
That's
SARS.
amazing.
But the OG SARS, like the coronavirus, is known because on the outside of the virion are
Wait,
these
wait, wait.
spike
So
proteins,
virion.
which
Wait,
gives
what's
it,
virion?
yes. So virion is like the body
Okay.
of the
Okay.
the
So we got
virus.
like
Um,
virion. Okay.
Little particle. And on the pictures you see, like on the news, it's like a circle thing with the little red triangles
Right.
coming off of it. That's the image they've been using for the last week, and when talking about it, those are the spike proteins on the outside of the virion, and that's what it uses to bind to the cells and enter. And in fact, that's what the spike protein is, what binds to the ACE2 receptor on those cells, which is like the keyhole for the key.
Hmm.
And it's only about 76% similar to the spike protein from the OG SARS. So there still is some difference to it. So they're going to have to play around and tweak to see, you know, which way they can modify it. And like, because they were working on a
Mm-hmm.
SARS vaccine before for the OG one to see if it's similar enough that that one may also be effective against this, or if they're too different that it's not actually going to work. So
And you said like a lock and key, so these little spiky things that are on the outside, and what makes it look like a coronavirus, that crown idea. What is so? I'm guessing the little spiky things are the key. What is the lock, and what's the point of a lock?
well, the lock is the ACE2 receptor. So once it binds, and they're still really not sure with this new SARS or the SARS-CoV-2, if it binds the cell, after it binds to the receptor, like it
Mm-hmm.
attaches, the spike protein goes into the
Okay.
ACE2 receptor. They were not sure if it then fuses and releases the genetic material inside the RNA, or if it's endocytosed where it's like sucked in like a bubble into the cell, and that's how it infects
Okay.
the cell. They're not really sure, but they're still trying to figure
And
that out.
is this also like? Is this something that all of my cells are going to get sick from?
No, and that's an excellent question. The ACE2 receptor is found mostly on lung epithelial cells, heart cells, I believe kidney and intestines. So I know there's some rumors going around that maybe COVID-19 or the disease may actually have gastrointestinal
Eee.
effects, or that there may be a fecal oral route of transmission, but that's not really for sure known yet. I think they're definitely looking at it to
Okay.
see, because if it could potentially infect the ACE2 on your intestinal epithelial cells, I mean, potentially there could be. But that's what they're trying to figure
All
out right
right.
now.
Okay. So we've got all these receptors. We've got coronavirus that has its little spiky things that are going to attach to different cells and help these viruses get inside. And then, so you said something about fecal oral route. How does this transmit? Because I mean, I will admit I actually ended up getting one of those N95s. I know that it's pretty much only effective in making sure that I don't get other people sick if I were to get sick. Um,
Yeah.
but like, what do I need to avoid? How am I going to get sick if I get sick? What should I be doing?
Well, the only known route they know for sure as of right now is the respiratory
Okay.
droplets. So someone coughing and sneezing. And like you mentioned with the masks, they're really only effective if you're the one coughing and sneezing. And Kenan Hutchinson did a great video the other day where he was actually his friend put whipped cream in his mouth and they stood across from each other and he wore the mask but his friends like coughed whipped cream at him and he still got sprayed on like his eyes and face. So like if that had been a virus or respiratory droplets, like it could have gotten in his eyes and
Mm-hmm.
infected him. But when his friend who had the whipped cream in his mouth wore the mask and coughed, the whipped cream didn't go anywhere because the mask was protecting it from
Huh.
spreading. So I thought that was a great analogy on why you just walking around in public wearing a mask is not really going to help you much. Plus, if you haven't been trained to wear masks or been fitted for an N95, which is not just making sure it fits properly, they'll do like smell and taste tests to see what's getting
What? Wait, wait,
through.
wait, wait, wait,
If
wait,
it's
wait,
not,
wait.
oh, yeah.
Okay. I I have always assumed that, you see the stuff where it only works if you use it the right way, and I thought that it was just people weren't pinching the little nose thing. And
No, and it can be fitting around the side of your face too. And to work with an N95 or like in a BSL-3 lab, which is labs that work with things that could potentially be aerosolized and get into the air, you have to be fit tested by OSHA to make sure your mask fits appropriately. And it'll do things like put a smell outside of your mask to see if like you can taste it, things like that, to actually make sure there's a good
okay.
fit
And
and stuff is
you
not
said
getting through.
OSHA, that's I know it's health something.
Yeah, Occupational
Oh,
Safety and
yeah,
Health
yeah, yeah. And so
Administration.
that makes sense in terms of BSL-3 because that's
Yeah,
biosafety level.
yeah,
And is it
yeah.
so BSL-4 is like Ebola, right? I don't even know how
Yes.
many things are in BSL-4. But
The viral hemorrhagic
okay.
fevers, Ebola, Lassa fever.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, nope, nope, nope. Glad that's not happening right now.
It's
I mean, it is, but
yeah. There's one more, but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It is happening, but I'm glad that that's not the.
Well, the head of my PhD program worked in
Oh,
like Ebola, and like my first day of my PhD program, he comes in and someone brought a thermometer up and he was checking his temperature because he was still under quarantine, but they let him come to
yeah,
work.
yeah. No, it. There's something about viruses that's so weird. It's so scary, right? That we can't see them. Um, until we have this vaccine, there's not a lot we can do, and so that's we mentioned this before, but one of the questions that we're getting now in the chats, and anyone who's watching, feel free to drop some more. Um, I've got from Phonetical. Now it's around. Is it something that's just going to be here to stay? Is it going to just keep coming back? Are we all going to suddenly get the vaccine for, uh, all of this different stuff?
And that still remains to be seen. Like I think they're still kind of watching and waiting because I mean, like with SARS and MERS, two of the other human coronaviruses, they died out. Like SARS self-limited from 2002 to 2004. MERS, like you'll still see SARS every once in a while too in animals, and then MERS too. They'll still see it in camels every
Mm-hmm.
once in a while
Mm-hmm.
as well. Um, but there's the potential that it could be around endemic. They also don't know. I know someone asked in the chat whether the summer was going to limit it because
Mm-hmm.
of the heat. And I don't think they really know for sure with this new virus if heat will directly kill it or if the summer months will kind of make it go
Mm-hmm.
away or if it'll just kind of recirculate back in the fall. We really
And
don't know.
let me know if I'm wrong, but that's basically how the flu works, right? There's these different patterns of it. And I guess that's sort of what we're trying to avoid right now is that if we can contain it, if we can mitigate these things, maybe we can avoid having recurrent coronavirus rounds. Yeah.
Seasons. Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing they're worried about now too is we're still in, like, at least in North America, we're still kind of in the tail
Mm.
end of a
Mm-hmm.
flu season. And so if you already have people in the hospital who aren't vaccinating, who contract the flu, they're kind of overwhelming the system right now with flu. They're also more susceptible to picking up another respiratory virus infection, whatever, whether it's this or measles or
Mm-hmm.
anything else. Plus, they're overloading the health system. So if we do have a crisis in the United States, you're going to have to deal with two
Mm.
crises, the flu and we really don't want
Yeah.
the and. So a lot of people are hoping we can like keep it at bay until this flu season ends, and then we can kind of tackle it this summer and then
Mm-hmm.
see what happens. But it'll be about a year before we can even get a really good
Right,
vaccine.
right. So we're looking at, wow, a year. And does that include like testing? I know there's places all over the world that are looking for vaccines. And is that including testing and including, making it, getting it out there? Like, even if, let's say we rush order this, what are we looking at?
Rush ordering it is
Okay.
about a year because there's a lot of research that goes into vaccines. They have the drug design part and the research in just how the virus infects and works. And thankfully, it's similar enough to SARS that we kind of have a good basis. It's not like we're starting from
Mm-hmm.
scratch. We've got some good groundwork and like a frame to start working within at least. But then they do the preclinical testing where they're working in, rats and then larger animal models like primates or even in cell culture. And from that, they'll go into phase 0 through 4
Mm-hmm.
testing with humans where they're actually seeing, okay, one, are there any weird side effects with this drug? Does this drug actually help the disease or this individual? Does it help the population as a whole? Does it actually
Mm-hmm.
do anything? And there's a lot of like, you can get to phase 2 testing where you're testing in humans to see if there's any effect on an illness. And then boom, it does nothing and you have to start over
Mm-hmm.
from
Mm-hmm.
scratch. So it could take a while. I think our best bet right now, we lucked out in that there's an antiviral drug on the market,
Hmm.
remdesivir,
Okay.
which has already gone through all the stages. Like it's already FDA approved
Okay.
for use. So they kind of bypassed a lot of that
Mm.
design and drug development discovery. And now they're able to actually do clinical trials, like skip all the
Mm.
preclinical stuff to get to clinical trials to see if it actually works against
Mm-hmm.
coronaviruses because it's already been tested and shown that it's not going to kill you if you take one dose.
Sure.
You
So
know,
it sounds like
nothing weird
it seems
happens
like
to
there's
you.
a bunch of different options coming down the line, but this is happening really fast. I know there was a bit of a lag time, and we have another question from Danielle. What explains the unproportional pockets like in North Italy? Um, yeah.
That
Go
I'm
ahead.
not so sure about. Actually, one of my coworkers is Italian, and he and I were kind of discussing today and trying to figure out why Italy was getting hit so
Mm-hmm.
hard by it. Our just discussing theory. There's no actual validation to it. He jokes he's very touchy feely, and he said maybe it's because
Mm.
Italians go up and when they greet, they kiss each other on the face.
Yeah.
That was his guess, but you might also see that in like France
Well,
if that was
yeah,
the case or
and I think
something.
that what we see too is that it's not the spike in cases doesn't really reflect cultural norms, right? Like, of course, in certain spaces, there's a lot of people really close to each other all the time. But I kind of wonder, is it something that's more about the testing, right? You look at South Korea and they have a ton of,
Oh
they
yeah,
have so many cases compared to some others nearby, but then you look at how many people they're
yeah.
testing, and of course they do. Um, you know, it,
And they're a country we should all be
yeah.
mimicking right now. They've got drive-through testing
Mm-hmm.
facilities. So they've got one of the best, like, it's new enough that we don't have enough data
Mm-hmm.
on it to say, what the true mortality rate is
Yeah.
with this, or what groups are actually being targeted, whether it's really, it seems to be elderly for
Mm-hmm.
the most part, or immunocompromised. But with South Korea, the fact that they've got drive-through testing that you don't even have to get out and potentially
Mm-hmm.
infect others, and they can get real statistics on who really is infected and who's not dying. Because in the United States, there's been a lag in
Sure.
testing. I think last time I checked the Johns
Mm-hmm.
Hopkins like active database, there was 100 cases in the U.S. and I looked right before this, and there was like
Mm-hmm.
605. But they're starting to ramp up testing, but you don't know who's asymptomatic and
Right,
who's not.
right. And
So,
the way that this works, and you said it's spread by droplets. I guess that's my other question though. If it's spread by droplets and somebody's asymptomatic, like shouldn't they not be coughing on other people?
yeah, and it's like my biggest pet peeve right now. It's like we're adults. We learned how to wash our hands and be like decent, hygienic people in
Mm-hmm.
kindergarten. And yet it's taking an outbreak to remind adults that you should be washing your hands after using the
Mm-hmm.
bathroom, and you shouldn't be just coughing in front of, like, I went to Walgreens two
Mm-hmm.
days ago and some woman just walked in the door, threw her head back and
No, no,
sneezed.
no.
Didn't cover, did nothing. And I'm just like, ugh, please
Oh.
don't. Um, but yeah, like basic
As I
hygiene,
touch my
like,
face, I know you can't see my video, but like I'm so surprised people in the comments yet haven't been like, Susanna, just never leave the house because, or just wear mittens or something. I literally painted my nails this blue color to try to keep my hands. Oh yeah, you
oh,
got them too. Literally just try to keep them off of my face. Um, yeah, but I mean, other than just like this idea of quarantining, and also you brought up the really good point of we see the flu every year. Apparently, people still don't know what to do. Yes, we will reiterate: wash your hands, don't touch your face, bring like don't sneeze on people, don't cough on people. If you are sick, stay home. Um, like yeah,
yeah.
but all of that is this do we have to be more worried than the flu right now? It kills so many people. Yeah, the fatality rate or mortality rate is like 3 point something, but like we said, the testing is off. Like why are we freaking out about this and not about the flu every year?
Well, and my thing is, I don't want anyone to freak out
Hmm.
about anything because they're freaking out and they're stockpiling toilet paper like they're pooping themselves every 30 minutes. Like it's like some woman just got in trouble. I've touched my face. Someone just got in trouble because she bought like 500 rolls of toilet paper. And it's like, if you go on quarantine for 3 weeks, do you go to the bathroom that much that you need 500 rolls of toilet paper?
I
Um, it doesn't help anything. But I mean, you should be concerned. And like what I'm saying is, don't panic. Like my big take home message is don't panic, but also don't be the asshole that if you get sick, you're like, oh, screw it, I'm going to go to work, or oh, I'm not going to wash my hands, or I'm not going to cough. It's like, don't panic, but also be cautious and aware of what you're doing as a human to affect
yeah.
other humans. Um, because, like, okay, yeah, we're young. You and I are both young and healthy. If we got sick, okay, there's the potential for us. Like 80% of cases are asymptomatic to mild, and only like 15% are severe that require oxygen therapy. I think 5% are really serious that require ventilation, which is higher than the flu. Or that's more
Hmm.
serious than the flu. But it's really not attacking younger people. It's mostly going for
Hmm.
the elderly and men over 60 who smoke, which is really
That's specific.
fascinating. Uh, whether that's a
Mm.
gender, well, smoking in general, it's going to hurt your lungs. But they're trying to figure out right now if there's a gender bias with the virus. It's, I know it's really interesting. It's still a little too early to tell because it could just be
Sure.
sampling error. They're noticing that with men, death from it is about 2.8% compared to women at
Yeah.
1.7.
Okay.
And so
Huh.
people have theorized that maybe it's because, so the genes that carry the ACE2, which you remember
Right.
is
The
the
H2,
receptor,
that's the like
the
we're
virus
calling
sensor.
that the lock, and the pointy things on the outside, those are the key.
Yeah, I kept calling it a keyhole earlier. Lock is the correct term for
I think you
that.
got it right, maybe. I don't
Um,
know.
no, lock is so much better than what I said. Um, but with the lock, that since the genes that code for that lock are found on the X chromosome, someone
Hmm.
has theorized that maybe it's because men only have one X chromosome, they have less, diversity in that gene, and maybe that's why they're more, susceptible to it. Another one's theorized that maybe estrogen has a protective effect for women. I mean, we still don't know. This is just speculation and theories based on some preliminary science, but be interesting to see where it comes out in the
Yeah,
future.
that I mean, it sounds like there's so many different facets of this, right? We've got that's genetics, and that's
Yeah,
hardcore genetics. That's chromosomes, what kind of proteins are on where. But then we've got like
yeah,
the epidemiology, how is it spreading? We've got the immunology side. Do you have any, speaking of the immunology side, one question I've gotten a lot is, and I can't answer it to save my life, is are there any ideas of why it's affecting younger or like older people instead of younger? I heard maybe are their immune systems that different?
Yeah, and it could be a little bit weaker. My dissertation was on how infants are less susceptible to brain damage from HIV, just because they're less inclined to have a pro-inflammatory immune response. Because everyone thinks inflammation is a good thing. It means you're fighting the infection, your immune system is working. But going back to that balance we talked about at the very beginning, if that gets thrown off and you have so much inflammation or too much pro-inflammation, there could be a problem. And so it's possible, either they have a more mounted immune response or just their immune systems are a little bit weaker. Their lungs are less healthy than younger people, and so maybe they're more likely to catch it. Especially with the nurse, like the really sad part with the nursing home up in Washington State that had most of the fatalities in the U.S. so far because they got sick and they weren't taking care of it. Nurses weren't wearing proper PPE and stuff just because they had there was a lot of mess in that.
Yeah.
That if you already have pre-existing lung conditions, you're going to be more susceptible
Sure.
to it. And they're even finding too that if you have like even cardiac issues or diabetes, you're at an increased risk of dying from SARS-CoV-2
It sounds like we're
infection.
really going to learn a lot from this situation. Like, it's not the way we want to learn. Both of us are hardcore scientists, and I think we should be learning about this through very different means. Petri dishes of cells, something like that. So that's not what we want. I just think there's so many amazing people out there studying this, and it is really scary. Like, I'm definitely pretty freaked out. I haven't done the toilet paper hoarding, but now it's in my mind. But no, I agree though. There's no reason to panic because it's going to just we're going to get through this.
Oh
Following
yeah.
those big
Oh
precautions.
yeah.
I want to get to one or two more of the questions from Phil Rouge. I read the transmissions seem to be stronger in familiar environments, i.e., prolonged and repetitive exposure, rather than random cough on a bus. It says, is that correct? But let's.
I actually haven't seen any
Okay.
data on that yet. So I mean, with HIV, they actually say like the more times you're exposed, the more likely you are to get
Sure.
it. But I'm actually not sure. Yeah, it was surprising. But I'm actually
Hmm.
with this one, I haven't seen any literature on that just yet. And the other interesting thing I do want to point out about some of the studies that I've mentioned, we're kind of at this awkward phase in science where
Okay.
the novel coronavirus, which means a lot of the literature that's coming out is just like the first thing we find, let's
Mm-hmm.
publish it. And science is great because we got that series of checks and balances like peer review and people who can replicate the studies. And with something new coming out, like they originally published that it was from snakes, which is completely
Okay.
incorrect. It's originally from bats that went to an
Ah,
intermediate host. But when people are just pushing to get this data out in the science, you're losing kind of that system
sure.
of checking, like, oh, was this study
Sure. Yeah,
replicated?
I
Is
regularly.
it just a fluke or
Right, right. And interesting, one of the questions that came on here where I was like, I don't know. I don't know if anyone has this, but Fanatical again, who has been a champion for this because throughout all of the lovely road bumps of me trying to figure out recording stuff, and now we've both got the headphones on that like I have the
you look really
I look
cool?
like I'm about to like pwn some seventh graders in I don't know, Mortal Kombat. Um Everyone's like, she has never done that.
Is Call of Duty cool again? Like,
Probably. I don't know. A lot of people are going to be stuck in their houses for a while, so I better get good at that. Interesting question, though.
yeah.
This idea of could it go back into animals? Could animals become the primary hosts? Is this something that we need to be worried about as well?
And definitely, that's very interesting to note because that's what happened with
Hmm.
MERS. MERS just kind of, not that it went back into animals, but that it kind of died off in humans and was self-limiting. And every once in a while, they'll do testing. There's a great show on Netflix called Pandemic, and they talk about the researchers who that you don't know now, but they're out in caves all over the U.S. and I mean
Yeah.
the world, sampling bat poop and animal poop to see if they can
Uh,
predict what the next spillover event is
wow.
going to be.
Wow.
So you'll see it circulate every once in a while. But bats carry lots of viruses, including the
Yeah.
hemorrhagic fevers like Ebola that we talked about
Yeah.
earlier.
Yeah. No, I. It's so interesting. All right.
Yeah, do you want to get a job sampling bat poop for the rest of
Whew.
your life? I would actually like, in no joke, I would
Oh,
totally do
you
that.
know what?
Like,
We need more of you. I will take a hard pass on that one. Um, all right. And last question I want to get to from our viewers. Like, they're being super awesome, so patient with all this. Hopefully the next one goes more
Thank
smoothly, and thank you
you.
so much to you. But one interesting question is like, is there a threshold of gathering size where we need to worry about, are you avoiding big groups? I kind of am, but I always avoid groups of people.
And I'm an extrovert, so I'm the opposite. I keep telling everyone that I'm going to be
Okay.
cautious. Right now, and they just confirmed the first
Okay.
case in New Orleans where
Hmm.
I'm located. But that's been under quarantine, and people seem to be pretty good about it so far. But my favorite parade that we have ever is the St.
Mm,
Patrick's Day parade, and that's
okay.
next weekend. And the cool thing about this one is, in normal situations, I think it's awesome. It'll bunch of be like a walking groups with flowers, and like get a kiss on the cheek,
Mm,
you get a cute little
mm-hmm,
flower. I'm just thinking about that now. Like that may actually
mm-mm,
be like
mm-mm,
terrible because
mm,
you're going to be
mm-hmm,
close in breathing range of someone who could potentially spread it. So
mm-hmm.
yeah, I would say be cautious. And if you do go to festivals, bring alcohol, hand sanitizer. I
I
know that
was
a
gonna
lot of them
say,
don't
like, I
have
usually would bring my own alcohol to the festivals. Like, yeah, that's
Everclear,
Everclear.
Everclear,
Oh
not
yeah,
Tito's. Did you see that Tito's is going around saying, please don't use our alcohol to make hand sanitizer. It's
yeah,
40% ethanol, not
yeah. Well,
60.
there we go. That'll be a woof
Everclear.
woof. This is sponsored by Everclear. That'll be
Uh,
great. Can't wait for
Yeah.
that.
Okay. That
Uh,
would be awesome. Uh, but no, it's actually, and a lot of people are buying the wrong hand sanitizer too. It needs to have
huh,
60% or higher alcohol because they've shown in studies it's ethanol or
uh-huh.
isopropanol are the two types of alcohols that killed MERS and the OG SARS. And like there's some on the market that are benzalkonium chloride, which is not effective, or they haven't shown that it's been effective against the
Is that
specific
something that I can
virus.
just look on the back of my products or okay,
Yeah.
okay. Ah, oh, neat.
Got one right here from Tulane, and I just want to point
Ah,
out it's not the stuff that's going to kill
ah.
the
Okay,
new
well,
SARS.
that's
Uh,
perfect. Great, great. You hold on to that one. And I do want to close out. There's a few more questions in there. You already saw on Instagram. There's like 1,027 questions. Twitter as well. We'll talk about how we can answer those at the end. But one question I really want to ask you is, what are you interested in seeing with coronavirus? What are you Googling? I'm looking at the map. I'm looking at these different things. But what are the questions that you're looking forward to researchers answering?
oh, I mean, I'm just fascinated with how it binds. And the cool thing that I've heard about recently is that the fact that it's not really attacking children.
Hmm.
Um, like with influenza, children seem to be the vectors. Like they're dirty little, they're
Vectors meaning
germy.
I think like angles, but
They get sick at
mm,
school, they come home, they spread it
okay.
to the adults. Like children are usually the spreader of
They're like the sticky
influenza.
balls. You're like the
Um,
little hands that you throw on the wall and it sticks, and then you come back and you have like three piles of lint. So they just collect it and
yeah.
spread it.
I mean, they've got fantastic immune
Huh.
systems, but I mean, if it was me versus a child, I would be done, immune system wise. But with this one, it's interesting to note that it seems to be adults transmitting it to children, and children don't
Hmm.
seem to be having as severe of infections. So I'm really, again, curious about that ACE2 receptor and whether children just have less expression of it, or maybe a slightly different presentation
Okay.
of it, or if they're not mounting as much of an immune response, and that's what's preventing. Because like how it's getting so severe is they're having that cytokine storm and that overwhelming immune
Mm-hmm.
response that's leading to pneumonia.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's going to be interesting to see in children what the differences are, because that could be a way we discover a
Hmm.
treatment option, finding out why children don't get so sick. We could,
Yeah.
steal those ideas from them and use that to make treatment
Well,
options. So that's what I'm most curious
that's
about.
awesome. And as expected, you answered so many of my questions, so many of other people's questions. Now I have more questions. Very excited to talk to other people later this week. And you're on the socials. People can ask you. I saw you
Socials.
like answering people's questions in there. Where can people find you? Where can they learn more?
I mean, for the most part, you can find me on Instagram, PH Delery. It's a pun because my last name's Delery and I have a
Nailed it.
PhD.
Nailed it.
Um, but yeah, I'm on Instagram. I kind of lay low on Twitter because the anti-vaxxers
uh,
threaten me, like
yeah.
physically threaten me, not that I'm threatened
Yes.
by them. Um, but I'm hang out on Twitter or Instagram. Sorry. So you can find me on Instagram. I'm pretty good about responding to questions, but if I get busy, just shoot them to me. I'll get them to them when I get a
Awesome.
chance. Science is kind of an up and down in terms of
That is
busyness.
so true.
So,
Yeah, I am really ready to graduate. But hopefully, we're looking at these big events. We're looking at coronavirus. We're trying to figure all this stuff out. It's very scary, but it's such a cool opportunity to talk to you. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. This is awesome. Yeah,
thank you.
and I'm going to talk to you later because we chat all the time. It's been wonderful. All right. Thank you so much.
Yes.
And I will talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay. And let's see. So we got to wrap it up. Thank you all so much for being patient, for answering some of the questions, for asking a whole bunch of questions. If you have any more for Elizabeth, right, reach out to her. We're going to have other people later on in future episodes. I really just want the opportunity to ask experts a bunch of questions, and this seems like a great way to do it. So keep asking those questions, follow, subscribe, share it with people. Let me know how the hell to do video things better because I'm just figuring it out as well. But I hope you all have a good night. I hope you learned something, and I hope you come back. All right. Bye.